Hello and welcome to the Dialoguers channel. I'm your host Nishmanya and this is the MG Windsor EV, the standard version, not the Pro, and it could possibly offer one of the best EV SUV packages in India, both in terms of its pricing and its feature list. So let's get into this review and find out whether it can live up to that statement or not. From behind the wheel, the MG Windsor provides quite a pleasant driving experience. And the things that I like most about it is one, just how refined it feels. Being an EV, of course, there are some benefits to that as the powertrain is silent basically. And MG's done a wonderful job of the noise insulation inside the cabin. There isn't a lot of road noise or even wind buffeting noise coming into the cabin. Even at up to speeds of 120, when I was out on the highway, it felt quite nice. Paired with that is the nice linear response of the electric motor. Now there's a single electric motor mounted on the front axle. It makes 136 horsepower and 200 Newton meters of torque. Now MG's target audience isn't driving enthusiasts per se. It's not looking for people who really want to hustle their cars. It is more targeting people who like a linear driving experience, and that is very evident in how this electric motor is being tuned, as it doesn't feel snappy like a lot of other EVs out on the market. I'm specifically looking at things like maybe the Nexon EV or even something like the Mahindra BE6. But this is a far more linear driving experience. You can feel it from the way the throttle pedal has been tuned, with the way the motor reacts. Even in sports mode, there is that little extra pep you get, but it doesn't feel ballistically quick like a lot of other performance EVs. So that will really do well with people who like to drive it sedately, as this car is set up to do, and people who are going to be chauffeur driven. You'll really appreciate the fact that your driver is not just going to stomp on the accelerator and just push you back in the seat. Some people don't find that comfortable. For instance, like if I stomp on it, you do get a move on, especially in normal mode and in sports mode, but it isn't as punchy as some of its rivals. This car actually encourages you to, be a little more relaxed, be a little more laid back, and take things easy. So that is a nice characteristic of the car. The ride quality of the Windsor EV is also pretty good, though there is a little bit of firmness, especially at low speeds. And that's primarily because of the setup of the car. Most of the weight is low down, there's a lot of load on the suspension. That may make it feel a little lumpy in terms of the ride quality, by which I mean that when you're going over bumps, it's not that it's harsh, it is like soft and rounded off, but it does feel like there's a little too much movement happening, and yeah, you might not find it as smooth as some of the rivals do it. Though all in all, it is still on the comfortable side, and it is a pleasant experience in terms of driving, because of that softer suspension setup. And I feel the trade-off is well executed, because from behind the wheel it feels engaging enough, but also when you are in the passenger seat or at the back where many of the owners are going to be, it is going to feel fairly well planted, and it also gives you that sense of plushness to some degree because of how soft the initial damping is. Now, the longer you spend in it and the worse the roads get, you will find that there is a lot of movement inside. But that is to be expected with this price point and with the kind of car and setup this is. I also say that the visibility out of the Windsor EV is actually pretty good. Your glass house is big. You have a large windscreen that slopes quite a ways forward. And just where the windscreen ends is where the car ends, maybe a foot later because of how stubby the nose is. But this gives you a good sense of placing this car. Some people might struggle a little bit because you can't see the corners exactly, but you can just get a decent sense of it in 15-20 minutes of driving this car. The dynamics of this car really did leave me impressed when I first got behind the wheel. For a car this big, for a car this tall, it has very well controlled body roll, and it doesn't feel like it wallows in the corners. It's because of the weight being so low down in the car. That is a very positive thing because it makes the car feel very stable out on the highway, which I feel a lot of people buying a car like this might be a little concerned about, like a city EV. This car is very capable of being out on open roads, doing 120 kph, 100 kph, and sitting very comfortably at those speeds. I want to quickly point out how convenient this steering wheel is. Not only is it light at low speeds because it's an electric unit and they've tuned it quite nicely, it weighs up very well as you speed up. Anyone who's new to electric steerings might find it a little jarring because of how quick or short the ratio becomes when you're at speed, but otherwise it's quite good. And this paired with the fact that its turning circle is actually quite nice. Now I'm at a very narrow stretch of road and I'd most likely have to do at least 5-6 points of turn in most normal cars. But I'm fairly certain that in the Windsor EV, I will be able to get through with just the 3-point turn. That's quite impressive. And this also makes it really convenient for driving in the city environment. One of the most important things with an EV is its range, and this Windsor EV, not being the Pro model, comes with a slightly smaller 38 kilowatt battery pack. It's got prismatic cells, and MG claims it has a 330 odd kilometer range. Though, however, while I've been driving it for the last couple of days, the real world range I have been able to get out of this is closer to about 230 to 250. Agreed, I've been driving it a little more spiritedly. And if you drive it maybe with a little more thought and a little more conscious effort to get more range out of it, you may be able to surpass that and get to 260, 270. But I think getting to 300 is going to be a stretch for most people in the real world. Let's quickly walk over the design of the Windsor EV, and I do apologize for it being a little dirty, but it's been raining all day and it's been really tough to keep it clean, so just bear with me. In terms of styling, the Windsor EV has a very different look to most other SUVs in our market. That's probably because it's been designed from the grounds up as an electric vehicle. And that can be most noticeable with its overall design. You can see it's got a short front and rear overhang. And here you can see there's no traditional or conventional bonnet. This is essentially a stubby nose car. The car basically ends maybe a foot and a half right after the windshield ends. Let's look at some of the detailing up here. You get this really nice LED headlight down here, and there's a light bar that runs all the way across the front end of the Windsor EV. It also has sequential turn indicators here, and this MG logo lights up. Looks quite cool at night. Maybe a little over the top for some, but I think it adds to the character. There's no traditional grille as this is an EV and it was designed as one from the grounds up, though there is an air dam down here which provides cooling for the battery and the electric motor. And there's a little bit of chrome down here at the bottom of the front bumper, as well as a little bit of chrome on the lining of the light bar. But apart from that, I think it's got a pretty interesting front end. The side of the Windsor EV is where you can see that stub nose design most clearly. You can see how quickly it drops off at the front and at the rear with very short overhangs. And because this has 2700 mm wheelbase, the wheels are set fairly far on either end of the car, giving it a fairly squat stance, which looks pretty good in person. Other design details include these pop-out door handles that deploy when you approach the car with the key in your pocket. There's this nice chrome strip that runs along the entire lower part of the glass house. There's a roof rail up here as well, and you get chrome accents down here on the side skirt. There is black cladding here with a knurled chrome effect, which looks neat in person but also a little aftermarket-y. These are 18-inch alloy wheels. They have a fairly simple design, though they do fill out the wheel arches well. You also get these little black accents around the tail light and here lower down on the bumper, and that same knurling can be seen on the chrome strip here as well. Now, for some this might look a little too bulbous. You guys let me know what you think about the Windsor EV down in the comments below. Around the rear, there are these really nice and well detailed LED tail lights, and there's this light strip that goes around the entire rear, mimicking the front end design. It looks quite chic. There is the Windsor lettering down here. There's the MG badge, though unfortunately it is not illuminated for those of you who like the one up front. There is a silver lining down here at the bottom of the bumper. There are some sensors down here as well, and the chrome strip we saw on the side wraps around the rear as well. Now, the integrated spoiler looks really sporty. I think they've done a good job with styling it and contouring it. So it's got this little hump in the middle, which I'm not quite sure what it's for. It doesn't seem to do anything. And another thing to note is that there's no windshield wiper on the rear glass on this top spec Essence variant of the regular Windsor, which seems to be a little bit of a miss, because even though they've raked the windshield, it's not enough for it to not accumulate dirt, especially with its SUV-ish aesthetic. I found that out over the last couple of days of driving it in the rain. So I wish they do add that at some point. Stepping inside the cabin of the Windsor EV, you're greeted with a very nice look. Now, MG's gone super overboard with its minimalism, so much so that there's only a handful of physical switches down here for your climate controls. Everything else is incorporated into this 15.6-inch touchscreen. That is laptop size of screen, and it is quite big when you see it in person. Now, the tablet itself is fairly responsive, though I feel more than the hardware, the software does let it down at parts. It feels like it stutters a little bit and gets stuck every now and then when you're switching through the different screens. However, when you go and actually use things like Google Maps or onboard navigation, the screen actually is fairly responsive. Now, a few things to note. Because of that lack of any physical switch gear, the few things that are in this screen that I don't like being in there. One is something like your rear view mirror adjustment. You actually have to go into the screen, find it and the bottom of your navigation bar, and then you have to use the buttons on the steering wheel to adjust both your mirrors. That's, I think, a few steps too many, especially when you're trying to find the right seating position. It seems very fiddly. Another thing that's in here, instead of being on the stocks here, is headlight controls. Now, I don't understand why it needed to be there since we do have a stock. Maybe just add another dial here. I found it fairly frustrating to have to go into the touchscreen to get my headlights adjusted for height and the beam. And obviously you can leave it on auto, but you still sometimes do need to adjust the height of your beam depending on how many people are in the back or how much stuff you're carrying. That said, there's a lot of utility in this screen as well. You do get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay both wireless. You get all your different sound controls. There's a 9-speaker sound system in the Windsor, which sounds pretty good. And you get ambient lighting, which I think MG says there's a whole host of colors. I'll put the exact combination down in the screen somewhere there. But yeah, you can basically have whatever colors you want, and they've done the ambient lighting really well. It comes along the bottom here and on the door cards. Now, talking about the design of the dashboard, it is quite refreshing as it doesn't really conform to anything else we've seen. There's like this flat slab that extends really far forward because of how much the windshield has been raked, and this gives a real sense of space and openness in the front. You have some soft touch materials here, But overall, there's a lot of hard plastics that have been used, obviously, to make sure that this can be as affordable as it is. So you have scratchy plastics here, you have scratchy plastics lower down. You got this wood finish plastic trim which does look quite nice, and I'm glad they took this over piano black. I feel like they've listened to people's feedback here. It looks good from a distance, so obviously when you touch it, it is very plasticky. Now you get 3 cup holders up here. There is this really big storage bin that you can cover or open. It's quite large. There's a center armrest which also has storage down here, and a 12-volt socket. It's quite cool. The glove box is not huge, but it is large enough to take all your ownership documents and maybe a few other things that you want to store in the cabin. Now the AC vents, there are 4 of them along the cabin. They're really nicely designed, and I feel like they get airflow around the cabin quite nicely as well. And another detail up front that I really like is this copper finish on the grab handles, which also extend onto the door handles out here. And even the speaker covers have that copper finish, so it looks very premium. I'm not a huge fan of the instrument cluster in front of the driver. This is a 8.8-inch screen, and yes, it's relatively clear, but this is something I found in the Comet EV as well. I feel like the font is a little too small. So sometimes when you're going through the different information screens, it just doesn't seem big enough for you to be able to glance and acknowledge. It feels like you really have to look at it and sort of focus on what the details are. And that's not helped by the fact that the switches to go through your different screens are on the right hand side of the steering wheel, but this switch actually ends up doing 2-3 different things depending on what position it's in. If you tap it once, it takes control of your media stuff, and if you tap it a second time, then it gives you control of your instrument cluster. And that can be a little unintuitive for people who aren't used to this sort of a layout, and it can be a little confusing. Another thing that can be really confusing is the fact that there's no start stop button. You basically just enter the car, put your seatbelt on and put it in drive, and the car will start moving forward, or put it in reverse and it'll start moving backwards. Now before I move to the rear, I want to talk about the front seats and the driving position. The seats themselves are really well cushioned, nice and soft, and they do feel quite nice on short bursts, but on longer drives I feel there's too much lumbar support and you can't manually or electronically adjust them, so it feels a little less comfortable on longer drives than what you'd initially expect out of them. Another thing worth noting is that the front passenger seat is only manually adjusted, so it's forward, backward and recline, but it does have seat ventilation. The driver's seat has 6-way electrical adjustment, so that's forward, backward, recline and height up and down. So it does offer a decent amount of adjustment, and no matter how tall you are or short you are, you'll find a good seating position. The steering is adjustable for rake and for reach, which is quite nice. Though one thing worth noting is, I remember when I did my first long stint in this car, I felt that there's something a little odd about the seating position, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it because I was able to adjust so many things. And what I later realized was that the steering wheel, while it looks symmetric, is a little offset to the right. So if you take the middle point of the steering wheel and pull it back, it's a little right of where I sit. And that is what was causing me to feel a little twisted in the seat. It's just very small. So do maybe test this out when you're on your test drive and see how it feels. I also really like the steering wheel itself. It's a flat bottom unit and it is wrapped in leather, feels very premium, and it weighs up very well as you're speeding up. And at low speeds, you can basically just twirl it with one finger, and that makes it super easy to maneuver, paired with that ridiculously short turning radius. The rear of the Windsor EV is a very nice and comfortable place to be, and if you consider the kind of car it is and its price point, this is a very spacious SUV. Now, I am 6 feet tall. This seat is set to my driving position. I have a decent amount of knee room on offer. That's about 4.5 inches, which is really good. And my headroom is about an inch or so. And that's with this big panoramic glass roof. Without that, on the lower variants, it would probably be closer to like 2 inches, 2.5 inches. Now the seats here again very well cushioned like the front, and they also have a neat trick where you can recline them. So there are these levers on the side. You can just pull and you can recline them quite a ways back and really stretch out and get comfortable. Being an EV, you have to note that the battery pack is under the floor, and that means that the floor height is a little higher than what most regular SUVs would be. And that means you do have a little bit of a knees up seating position, but honestly, compared to other EVs, they have done a really good job with judging the seat height here. It's not too bad, though if you're taller like me, you'll feel that the under thigh support isn't the best, basically because this rounds off at the front. So it does leave you feeling like you're not quite supported all the way through. But because there's a decent amount of space, you can actually tuck your feet under the front seat and you'll get a comfortable seating position, especially with the recline. In terms of amenities back here, well, there aren't a whole lot of goodies here. The materials of the plastic, like the front, are hard only, so they're scratchy. But you do get a little bit of a leather insert here at the door pad. It's padded, looks and feels quite nice. There's an armrest with two cup holders. This falls at a nice height, feels fairly ergonomic, and you can be quite comfortable sitting here in the back. You do miss out on things like a sunblind, integrated sunblind for a car with such large windows. I think it should have been something that could have been added in. And you have a rear AC vent, singular. You can't split the airflow two ways, so that might be a little bit of an issue. But in these monsoon conditions, the AC has been super effective. It's cooled the car down fast enough. I fear that in peak summers, it might require a little extra cooling and, ventilated seats back here like in the front. So I think maybe having two vents would have been a little better. You do also have a little bit of a storage space up front out there as well. So it's something that you could probably put some tissues and stuff in, but it's not very practical. You also have seat back pockets for magazines and other literature that you would probably be carrying around. And of course, the 3-point seat belts for all three occupants. Being an EV, this also has a flat floor, so it won't be too difficult to have a third passenger in here. And the cabin is fairly wide. So all in all, the rear seats are quite comfortable. The panoramic glass room offers a really good view out and a lot of natural light into this all black cabin, which makes it feel very airy. Now the boot of the Windsor EV is also, I think, going to be quite a bit of a selling point. On this top spec Essence version of the regular Windsor EV, there's 570 liters of boot space with this space above the cargo floor and what's below. It's actually quite deep. You can see I have my camera bag. It is quite small. Like you could easily fit at least 2 to 3 medium-sized suitcases in here, plus some duffel bags or overnight bags. And if you incorporate the lower part, you could probably fit another medium-sized suitcase in there. On this top spec variant, it loses a little bit of space because there's a subwoofer mounted under the floor, but you could easily replace that with a spare wheel or a tire repair kit and store more stuff down there. You can also see that the rear seats do fold down in a 60-40 split, and it's a relatively flat loading area afterwards, so you can really put a lot of stuff in if you're taking this for the airport run. Especially with that BAAS service, it makes the ownership experience less daunting for new EV adopters, and it also makes the battery degradation resale value aspect of the car a little more easy for you to digest. Plus, that cheap initial purchase cost can be very tempting. 12 lakh rupees for a car of this size with this much space, it's a really interesting proposition. But if you decide to purchase it outright, I still think it's got a strong case to make. At 16 lakh 15,000 ex showroom, this is still one of the biggest cars you can probably purchase in this price point in terms of the space you have inside. And while it is missing a few features here and there, I think the overall package that you get in terms of the performance, ride and handling, fit and finish, it's all very good. And more than that, it is the fact that the running costs of this car are going to be super low, being an EV. Now, I put a disclaimer in all my reviews that a EV is not for everyone, and that still holds true. This isn't the car you get for your one car garage, because it's only got about 250 odd kilometers of real world range. According to my testing, you could probably eke out a little bit more here or there, but this will primarily be confined to the city limits. And if you do take it out of town, you're going to have to be very mindful of chargers, and you're going to have to be very mindful of distances. You'll probably not want to go more than 2-3 hours driving on the highway without knowing where your chargers are. That apart, they're cheap to run, and that is why they're so enticing as second cars. You can have a large comfortable car for your long distance driving, or something a little more sporty and engaging to drive for your main long drives out of town, and keep this to do the grunt driving work of commuting within the city. It's cheap to run, relatively cheap to maintain in theory, and it offers you a lot of space and a comfortable ride. Also, those looking at it as a chauffeur driven package will be quite interested in what the Windsor EV has to offer. So let me know, would you guys purchase this at roughly about 16 lakh rupees ex showroom, or would you buy a petrol or diesel car? Until next time, cheers.